am Sherry Gleed, and I am the Dean of NYU Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. And it is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to this, which is our 10th debate. We've been doing this for 3 years. We worked with the Century Foundation to create a public debate series because we really felt that thoughtful, informed dialogue about key issues was a really important public service we could do. Tonight, you'll hear a debate on the merits of 2 leading ideas, either a universal basic income or a federal jobs guarantee. We may not agree on which is the best proposal, but I think we all do agree that the dialogue itself is valuable. Before we start, we want to take your pulse about tonight's topic. We're going to conduct a poll right now, and then we'll conduct another one after the debate is over and see if any of you have changed your minds. Are we getting some convergence here? So sort of split with a lot of undecideds out there. So there's lots to learn, I think, in tonight's debate.
I'm very excited about tonight's debate. Guaranteed jobs and UBI are 2 powerful interventions designed to recognize the dignity of work and address profound and very well documented income inequality. Like many of you, I see the virtues and challenges of both proposals, and I look forward to learning more tonight. We're very honored to have one of the nation's leading journalists on issues of economic policy here to moderate tonight, Lydia DePillis. You almost certainly have read Lydia's reporting in the New Republic, in the Washington Post, Houston Chronicle, CNN, where she is currently a senior economics writer. She is an award-winning journalist with remarkable knowledge of the intricacies of policy. But what really sets her apart is her ability to explain those intricacies in real ways and show how statistics and policy play out in real lives, or as she puts it, to find the little story to tell the big story.
Before we can start debating whether universal basic income is better at reducing inequality than a job guarantee, I should tell you what a universal basic income is. So the idea of a universal basic income is to give everyone a cash transfer equal for everyone, and there are no conditions. So everyone gets it, it's universal, there's no conditions, and it's the same for all. So, you know, it's helpful here. This is a debate about US policy and in the world, but after all, we're in the US. So we can go back to the roots of the American Constitution, which says that people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I want to point out to you, and I'm sure it's not going to be news, that these things like liberty and the pursuit of happiness are not things that we are all equally entitled to in practice. We don't all have the same access to those things. There's a lot of inequality in our ability to freely pursue our own projects that we think are valuable.
So as my colleague pointed out, the private sector alone has never been adequate to deal with reinforcing inequalities or worker vulnerability. Moreover, far too often, even those with a job lack a quality job. 44% of the homeless work. 40% of workers that are employed in insecure, contingent type work. And almost half, 44% of workers, earn below $15 an hour. We need a societal shift from public policy that prioritizes tax cuts for the rich and economic austerity for everyone else, or tax incentives and deregulation that attempt to bribe or cajole an already record-earning profit sector to provide more jobs and rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Such an approach further entrenches our plutocracy and leaves workers vulnerable to the whimsical nature of trickle-down employment and the instability of contingent work. My concerns with universal basic income are not philosophical, but practical. It is the universal and the flat dollar amount of basic income that is inflationary and potentially inequality enhancing. We propose the permanent establishment of a federal job guarantee to eliminate the oxymoronic working poverty notion and involuntary unemployment altogether. It would provide a public option of employment that enables existing workers, not just those that receive the job, better ability to bargain for better wages and working conditions because they have an alternative. Our plan for a federal job guarantee would provide a direct source of employment that enables all workers, particularly those at the low end of the labor market, to bargain for better wages, benefits without the fear of destitution from the threat of unemployment.
US growth since 1980 has not benefited at all to the bottom 50% of the population. Half of Americans have seen none of the growth that we have had. And most of it has gone to the top, to the very rich. And so this leads to a profound inequality of opportunity in American society. And we have to think about ways to address it. I just want to respond to the idea that's been brought up that the universal basic income by definition is the same for everyone. That is true with respect to what we're giving people, and I think that is, from a philosophical perspective, a very important aspect, because it is the way in which we all have a certain right, and the right is the same for all. However, once you consider how this right is financed, then the picture changes in terms of the net. Because basically, if we're going to finance something, say, through a form of progressive taxation, high-income people pay way more into the scheme than what they're getting out. So as such, it is still on net redistributive, but it's important that everyone gets the same thing, because otherwise there is this stigma of you're the one who's on welfare, you're the one who's receiving these benefits, you're being singled out as being one of those people who maybe are lazy, who maybe can't, fend for themselves. And so in that sense, it is philosophically important that it's the same to all, but it does not mean that everyone benefits in the same way, again, depending on the way that the scheme is financed.
If we have a federal job guarantee as a right, we displace stigma. That's a reorientation of our current frame of disciplining poor people, but rather talking about a right to a job, a birthright to a job.
You come in and you say, I want a job, but is there actually a job that you can do, or a job that you want to do, or do you have time to be in a job? Maybe you have a small kid at home and you're in poverty and you can't really spend that time to be in a job.
First off, you wouldn't just be dictated a job. There would be an inventory of jobs as well as an inventory of people, and the inventories of jobs would take place based on community needs. So local communities, as well as the federal government, Indian nations, et cetera, they would develop an inventory of all their infrastructure needs in a job bank we would prioritize which jobs get delivered based on the communities in the most need and the projects that can have the most social benefits.
Great introduction from both of you. Thank you so much. But the first question you're going to ask when you go out in the real world is, how much is this going to cost, and can we afford it? It sounds very expensive.
Okay.
So how much a basic income costs is simple math. It depends on how much you want to provide. So take your amount and multiply by the number of people in the population. So therefore, it can cost a variety of amounts depending on how much you want to give people. And so I think from a pragmatic perspective, we should be starting small with the idea that this is a top-up. We already have certain programs that help poor people. In the short run, we want to go step by step and introduce a small amount to start with and then see how it goes.
I think that in our progressive circles, we far too often begin with the question of how are we going to pay for it. That wasn't asked during that last tax cut that the Republicans passed. But nonetheless, if we want a substantive basic income where everybody gets the same income, the costs are dramatically higher than a federal job guarantee. My partner started with $1,000. That's not transformative. That's not going to transform anybody, especially somebody at the low end of the labor market. $1,000 a year is not going to transform their life.
Is it transformative compared to what? Compared to a big pie in the sky thing, maybe it's not very transformative, but compared to the policy
Would it really give you an
now,
outside option, I guess is the question.
I think it can give you an outside option depending on your family situation and the other benefits that you're already accessing. So that's why I was saying, like, this is a step-by-step approach. So for some, together with the benefits they already have and this extra income, it would give them an outside option. This amount realistically will not give you an outside option if that's all you have.
Did you have a response, or should I move on?
I'm happy to respond. Don't ever give me the mic, I'll respond.
Go for it.
All right. So a few points. We spend well over $700 billion on anti-poverty already. So a federal job guarantee is not meant to replace our entire social safety net, but there would be dramatic reductions in our social safety net, again, which is aimed at subsistence, not necessarily elevating people out of poverty. I'll also point out that like earned income tax credits, which I'm not opposed to. I support them, and to some extent, I support basic income. It subsidizes low-wage jobs. In contrast, a federal job guarantee disciplines those jobs. It says that if you don't offer at least a decent wage, workers can leave and come into our program and have decent wages.
I feel like there was a line there.
Yes, it is a misconception that the basic income encourages low-wage jobs. On the contrary, economic theory predicts that it would increase wages because workers now have a choice. Of course, as we said, it depends a bit on the amount, that's for sure. But certainly some workers have a choice to go take their basic income and not accept jobs that are not acceptable as a package, right? So it's not just how much they pay, but the whole working conditions and what the job is.
It's not the same. It's not the same. The dollar totals that have been presented are not enough to elevate somebody out of poverty. $1,000 will not elevate somebody who's in poverty or part of the working poor out of poverty. So if you were to include enough income to elevate them out of poverty, then we worry about costs. Like I said, simply $10,000 would amount to over $1 trillion in spending, about $3.4 trillion if we have a universal basic income.
So I'd love you guys to clarify how your respective solutions interact with existing programs, and is your intention to get rid of them?
One big advantage of the basic income is its simplicity. You just do it, PAF, transfer cash. It's basically the lowest cost that it could be in terms of getting the cash from the treasury in the hands of the people. So now, once you say that, you're thinking about the broader array of social programs. And I would argue that if we had a big basic income, it would be worth thinking about whether some programs are very similar to a basic income, like food stamps. Maybe it makes sense to get rid of food stamps if we have a big basic income. Because again, like more simplicity, cash, flexibility, check, some savings in terms of administrative costs.
All these programs can be cannibalized. And I think me and my partner, neither one of us want them to be cannibalized. So I think it's important with any policy that you establish a set of values first. So my colleague brought up administrative costs. There's a lot of work that's not being done by the private sector that we need. As a matter of fact, people often talk about the federal job guarantee in the context of what the New Deal did. We can reimagine the future we want with a federal job guarantee. What do we need as a society? So I think it has that feature. The private sector is certainly not addressing our climate concerns. So we certainly could do things like literally green every house in America with a federal job guarantee.
But why do we need to have the public sector install the solar panels? This is an activity that can easily be done by the private sector. And so I don't necessarily see why in general we want to do anything that needs to be done through the public sector. I think the private sector should always be the first option, and then ask yourself, okay, is there a good reason to do the public sector? And then, yeah, sure, we should do the public sector, but not just because we need to place people in jobs. I don't want to have a society where we're desperate to place people in jobs and we're being inefficient at what we're doing just so that we can place people to do jobs. Let's do the government job efficiently. Do the public service when that's the more efficient way of doing it. Do the private sector when it's the most efficient way of doing it without having to worry about placing people into jobs.
We now have the moment of truth where you all vote to see who changed their minds.
Oh.
This is like worse than Florida.
Yeah, that's probably
Wait, where's this? There's like a vote count total?
I want to see the paper ballots.
keep going.
Okay, we're gonna call it. We're calling it merged within the margin of error. Yeah. Thank you guys. Shake hands.
Thank you.